Let's bring in Newsweek's senior editor at large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, Justin Trudeau deserves that and so much more. His style of leadership, that performative caring together with the gross ineptitude, just sums up his time in office and sums up the World Economic Forum as well.
Yeah, you kind of have to love Ezra Levant there of Rebel News at the end to just talk about how every time they tried to have a conversation, that Trudeau moved to arrest Rebel News. I mean, that is just deliciously acerbic and pretty much directly on point because, frankly, Canadians' individual liberties, their collective common good, the country, and any way you measure the health of a citizenry or an individual citizen, it went down. It went down under Justin Trudeau. The Canadian economy went down. The Canadian standing on the world stage went down. It's really quite tragic. I mean, Justin Trudeau's predecessor, about a decade ago, Canada was led by Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper was an excellent leader there. Canada did not have to go in this direction. And earlier this year, it looked like Canada was going to shift back to the Tories, back to the Conservative Party there.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we end up getting this current slouch in office, Mark Carney. So a lot of self-inflicted wounds when it comes to our northerly neighbors here in America, which frankly kind of makes them the butt of a lot of jokes. That's probably why Trump was ridiculing them so much earlier on in his presidency, talking about annexing Canada and all of that there. Because Canada is, in theory, a first world country, but unfortunately, the day to day lives there is so utterly overrun by Islamization. It is so utterly desiccated by the roots of leftism when it comes to things like COVID vaccines there, when it comes to the transgender phenomenon, when it comes to sending in CPS, child to protective services, to snatch up teenagers whose parents don't affirm their identity there. It's frankly becoming something of an Orwellian tyrannical state there. And Trudeau, as you said, deserves all this and much more.
I've got to say, I do like this new trend in the World Economic Forum in Davos, where you've got leaders like Donald Trump and Javier Milei who go there to essentially mock the globalists and everything they stand for. Let's hear a little of what Javier Milei had to say.
That is why in this same place in 2024, I stated that the West was in danger as a result of having embraced increasing doses of socialism in its most hypocritical form, which is wokeism. In turn, in 2025, I explained the mental parasites sown by the left in humanity. However, 2026 is the year in which I bring you good news. The world has begun to awaken. The best proof of this is what is happening in the Americas with the rebirth of the ideas of liberty. Therefore, the Americas will be the beacon of light that will once again illuminate the entire West.
What do you make of that, Josh? If we are in a civilizational war, can the West prevail?
How do you not love this guy? I mean, how does someone like listen to this language and not just utterly love this guy? I'm talking about the mind virus of wokeism. It's paraphrased. It's a very close paraphrase there. I mean, he went in there guns blazing. Argentina is no slouch as a country, Rita. For a very long time, Argentina was one of, if not the preeminent economic powerhouse in all of Latin America. They fell quite a bit there due to self-inflicted socialist wounds. But under Milei, the economy really has turned around in pretty breakneck fashion. Look, there actually is something of a momentum shift when it comes to Latin America more generally. Chile, which had been governed by a horrific left-wing socialist prime minister, now they have an incoming very conservative right-wing prime minister there. You see other signs of hope as well, especially in Central America. Obviously, the El Salvador situation when it comes to Bukele is very much a bright spot there when it comes to massively decreasing crime there. So Latin America overall, I would say, with the glaring exception of Brazil, which is run by Lula da Silva, a Chinese Communist Party ally, if there ever were one. But with the glaring exception of Brazil, there's a lot of very good stuff happening right now currently in Latin America. And frankly, Reed, I think a lot of this actually is downstream of Trumpian leadership. I mean, this is kind of the Monroe Doctrine, or as Trump calls it, the Don Road Doctrine. I mean, this is when Donald Trump goes in with the staggering operation in Venezuela to get Nicolas Maduro, one of the great demonstrations of American exceptionalism, frankly, in this century. I mean, it was an utterly staggering operation there to get this narco-terrorist socialist tin pot dictator there in Caracas there. So when America leads, a lot of the rest of the Western Hemisphere of the Americas follows there. And I think Javier Milei is frankly just an indicator of a lot of good that is still to come.
And he doesn't get the credit, does he, Javier Milei, for what he's achieved in such a short period of time. The economic reforms there, slashing inflation, and he's managed to slash the poverty rate in Argentina whilst also reducing welfare programs. You wouldn't think those two things would go together, but he's managed to achieve it, Josh. And all the so-called progressives who should be applauding, they call him another right-wing extremist.
Yeah, they do because they just see someone who mouths certain things they don't like, Rita, and they decide that you're a fascist. They don't really care what the results are. I mean, so, so much of the left here, especially in the United States, that's obviously the country that I pay close attention to, but certainly internationally as well there. They really don't particularly care about results, do they? I mean, think about here in the United States. I mean, gas prices are the lowest they've been in 5 years. And inflation is quite reasonable. The stock market is approaching all-time highs on seemingly a daily basis. The trade deficit's the lowest it's been in literally decades. I mean, I go on and on here. It's really quite good, actually, the American economy. But nonetheless, there is a subjective sense because the media says over and over again, oh, we have an affordability crisis. It's kind of an affordability hoax, actually. And unfortunately, there are a lot of global people out there who, because they don't pay attention to the actual facts and they just hate the individual who is giving a certain policy, whether it's Milei in Argentina, whether it's Trump here, whether it's any number of other conservatives all across the world there. Facts increasingly do not frankly change opinions. Unfortunately, we live in a day and age where feelings and emotion oftentimes carry the day, and that's happening in Argentina and to an extent here in the United States as well.
Now, the media has made much of President Trump's faux pas during his speech, where he more than once referred to Greenland as Iceland. I've got to say, I've made that same mistake as well. But on a bit more serious note, what can you tell me about the current state of negotiations and what the Trump administration really hopes to achieve with or without its NATO partners?
So, Rita, personally, I am all in for the Greenland thing. I am like 10 out of 10 enthused at this, actually. I think this is one of Donald Trump's greatest ideas. Now, the Canada thing was classic Trumpian braggadocio. I mean, basically trying to kind of needle and twist and poke fun at our deeply socialist, tyrannical neighbors to the north. By contrast, the Greenland thing is actually very, very serious. And historically, the United States has expressed interest many, many times. A lot of folks don't realize this. America has expressed interest in Greenland, Rita, many, many times in American history. So it was actually William Seward, who was Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State, going all the way back to 1867, 2 years after Lincoln's assassination. Seward was the first man to actually mull the possibility of trying to acquire Greenland. Harry Truman in 1946, 1 year after the end of World War II, at the very beginning of the Cold War, he made a formal offer. He actually offered $100 million to the Danes to acquire Greenland. He saw, just as Donald Trump sees, he saw Greenland as a crucial piece of territory when it came to the then nascent Cold War, trying to deter Soviet expansionism into the Western Hemisphere. That's how Trump sees it today when it comes to both Putin's Russia and to Xi Jinping's China. So I think that Trump is actually very, very serious about potentially acquiring Greenland. Now, the latest is that he put out a Truth Social post saying that he's going to put a pause on tariffs on the European powers because the broad contours of some deal have maybe been reached. I take Trump seriously, but not literally on this one. Maybe there was a nice phone call or two there. But Donald Trump also pays very close attention to the stock market. And I think he probably was a bit spooked out when the stock market went down after the tariff announcement was made there. So I think that he's I think he's playing a little bit of 4D chess here, if I'm being very honest with you. I think that he still ardently desires Greenland. And I think there's actually a very real chance that when push comes to shove, I think that Greenland could actually become a U.S. territory by the end of Donald Trump's term. Let's not forget, by the way, that one of the last great instances of American territorial expansionism about a century ago, it's now called the U.S. Virgin Islands there in the Caribbean. Where did we get that from? We actually got it from Denmark.
Yes, you bought it, I think, for a bargain figure of around 25 million, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, there may be a negotiation happening right now with a price being discussed. I do like this little bit of cheek from some folk in Greenland. What do we call them? Greenlanders. They're mocking a certain aspect of modern American culture here. That's called the fentanyl lean, for those of you who are not familiar with that. Bringing America culture to Greenland, that video alleges. And that culture, I mean, it's funny because it's kind of true. That culture is evident in big cities, blue cities across America, where you see this very visible drug problem. What's your response, Josh, to those who say Donald Trump needs to be more focused on issues such as that? He needs to be America first and worry less about foreign policy.
I think they can walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, America first means a lot of things. It's kind of an abstract term, but America first has both foreign and domestic ramifications there. And one of the many ways that Donald Trump understands America first on the international stage, and this is laid out very clearly in the excellent national security strategy document that the White House produced about a month and a half ago, they emphasize time and time again Western hemispheric dominance. They call it the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary on the Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine was this early 19th century statement by James Monroe, an early president of the Republic, who basically said that America has the right, if not the duty, to act when hostile foreign powers intrude in the political affairs of the Western Hemisphere. And then Teddy Roosevelt, in the first decade of the 20th century, issued what's known as the Roosevelt Corollary, basically doubling down, expanding on this Western Hemispheric priority document. So Donald Trump is basically just reiterating this. And again, the Maduro raid, Operation Absolute Resolve, I think is kind of the quintessential encapsulation of this doctrine. Greenland is very much part of the Western Hemisphere. It's basically right off the coast of Canada to an extent there. So this fits well within his conception of America first. And I think prioritizing the Western Hemisphere is America first. We're not prioritizing necessarily other far-flung regions of the world. We're prioritizing our own backyard. So look, we obviously can and should care about domestic issues, but they're already doing that. I mean, look at the way that this administration is enforcing immigration law, the way that they are enforcing law and order in places like Minneapolis there. I mean, they're very much focusing on the domestic and the foreign. So I think it's something of a false choice, Rita. Again, I'm pretty enthused about the Greenland thing. I'll be honest with you. I was actually Googling a little bit about Nuke Golf Club, the only golf course in all of Greenland there. I'm getting pretty excited about a possible golf trip there with the boys, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, there's plenty of scope for further development in Greenland. You could have all sorts of things happening there shortly. Now, before you go, we've heard from Javier Milei, and President Trump also gave a memorable speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. But another man who gave a very notable speech is the Trump administration's Treasury Chief, Scott Bessent. Have a listen to this.
Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros, and the Davos is the perfect place for a man who, when everyone else was on lockdown, when he was having people arrested for going to church, he was having $1,000 a night meals at the French Laundry, and I'm sure the California people won't forget that. And I can tell my message to Governor Newsom is the Trump administration is coming to California. We are going to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse.
Josh, he went on to point out what's happened to California under Governor Newsom, the record numbers leaving the state, the surge in poverty, homelessness, the madness during COVID, the criminally inept response to the wildfires. The list is very long. And yet, Gavin Newsom right now is a front runner to be the next Democrat presidential candidate.
Yeah, Rita, I actually just flew back from California. I was actually just out in Los Angeles for a speaking event there, and I was talking with some friends over lunch and dinner about this, about whether or not Gavin Newsom actually is the 2028 frontrunner. And a lot of my friends out in California, frankly, just can't believe it because he has such an awful, pitiful track record when it comes to escalating crime, when it comes to escalating homelessness and drug overdoses. He's literally the first governor in the history of California. California became a state in the mid-19th century. He's the first governor ever since the Golden State became a state to oversee a net population egress, more people leaving than coming in. Literally for over a century and a half, California was growing and growing, and then Gavin Newsom comes in and people all of a sudden leave. So I mean, dude is just is just totally cancerous as a politician there. Having said that, this kind of gets back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, Rita, which is my working theory. Unfortunately, I wish it were not the case. There are a lot of people who just don't really vote on those particular grounds. They look at Gavin Newsom as Secretary of Defense says, he's this guy's out of central casting. He looks the part, he talks the part.
Yeah.
Now, if he doesn't get it, it's because he's a white dude, right? I mean that actually could be the number one issue working against him in a 2028 Democratic primary. But based on very superficial factors there, he's very smooth. He's very glib. He's able to kind of deflect interviewers' questions back to his comfortable terrain there. He really is. I mean, despite his awful, awful, awful track record, paradoxically, he is something of a model politician. So I'll be honest with you, Rita. I think the Republicans actually tragically should probably fear him in 2028. The good news is that my California friends seem to think that Kamala Harris is going to be the favorite again in 2028 there. And boy, would I lick my chops at that possibility.
That, yeah, you will hope for that. I think every Republican would be hoping for a Kamala, maybe a Kamala and Newsom ticket. That would be very interesting. Could we have both of them from California? You probably couldn't, could you?
It would be a constitutional challenge, but someone could possibly change residences. But we've had this conversation before. I mean, Trump almost picked Marco Rubio there. They're both Floridians there. There are ways around it, but it definitely is uncharted waters in American constitutional history.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.